Welcome back to A Fine Time for Healing, a place where your physical, emotional, and spiritual well being are all that matter. So put your feet up, relax, and enjoy today's show. You know, I've said it in one of my books, and I do say this a lot, miracles happen. And the thing is, sometimes they come disguised as adversity, and sometimes suffering can be associated with it. But that doesn't make them any less miracles. And today we're talking to a miracle survivor, a miracle woman, Geralyn Ritter. And when you hear her story, you'll understand why I say that, because this has been quite a journey for Geralyn. And she wrote about it in her book, Bone by Bone, where she tells the entire story. So, Geralyn, welcome to A Fine Time for Healing.
Thank you so much, Randy. I'm really delighted to be here.
I'm so delighted to have you. So, in a split second, you went from being a devoted mother of three boys and globe-trotting senior executive for one of America's largest companies to an immobilized ICU patient on a ventilator with a highly uncertain future. Tell me about the day, what happened before, and then how it progressed for you.
The thing that always strikes me about the day was just how ordinary it was. I live in the Northeast. My job takes me to Washington, D.C., on a very regular basis. And I'd gotten up early that morning. It was an ordinary Tuesday in May. I had meetings in Washington, took an early train, a couple-hour train south, did my meetings, got back on the train, was headed home, stopped off, had an event in Philadelphia, got back on the train, sat down, long day, texted my husband, leaving Philly, home soon. And he was on his phone. He texted right back, "Hey, great to see can't wait to see you." Stevie, our youngest, who was 8 at the time, he said, Stevie got a legitimate base hit tonight at his T-ball game. And Stevie's a wonderful and athletic boy, but didn't get a lot of base hits. So
Okay,
that
all
was,
right. So that
we
was
had this,
amazing.
yeah, we had this joking back and forth. I can't wait to get home and give him a hug. It was just so normal. And we're pulling out of Philadelphia. I'm texting with my husband, and I put my phone down. I get off at the next stop. I was reaching up into my bag to get something out to read. Eh, I stood up in the aisle, and I was just reaching into my bag in the luggage rack above my head. Um, and I started to lose my balance, and I held on to the luggage rack. And I remember I had taken that train so many times. I knew the route, and I remember thinking the train was going fast. And then I started to get annoyed. At first you're like, oh, well, get home quick. And then I started to get annoyed because I was losing my balance, and I couldn't reach into my bag like I wanted to. And then the next thing I knew, I'm standing there holding on the luggage rack, and I felt like we were tipping, and the train was going around a curve, and it seemed, I remember really clearly thinking, we can't be tipping. Like the just like trains don't tip, and you're telling yourself that this isn't real, that you're not tipping. And then there's this flash of realization that we were tipping over, and I remember screaming, and that's my last memory.
Which car were you in?
I was in the first car of the train. I was in the first car of the train, and um, I remember because I was traveling on business, and that was the business class car. There were not too many people. I think in the newspapers afterward, there were 12 people in the car. And I remember the faces of some of them seated around me. And unfortunately, a number of people in that car passed.
Understandably, when you see the pictures of that car, you would think no one survived.
Absolutely.
Um,
Some of the other cars on the train, it later came out actually very quickly that the train was going 106 miles an hour on a curve designed for a maximum of 50. So more than twice the speed limit on that curve, and it derailed going 106 miles an hour. Um, 8 people died that night, and some of the cars are are jammed up, they're tipped over on the side, actually most of them, but the first car, it just looks like a debris field. If you look at the newspaper photos, it doesn't look like a train car.
No,
It looks like that was a 7-car train, not an 8-car train, because the first car is
there's no
just
car
debris.
left.
There's no car. There's no car.
So, how long had you been on the train when this happened?
About 2 hours. The train derailed just north of Philadelphia. So it was about 2-hour ride from Washington to Philly. And it derailed, oh, I don't know, just about 20 minutes outside of Philadelphia. It's actually, I later read in the paper, it is the sharpest curve in the Northeast corridor for trains. Um, but
Wow.
the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, did an investigation, and the cause of the accident was ruled essentially distracted driving. It was a loss of situational awareness, is what they called it on the part of the engineer. He was sober, he was not on his phone, he was not on drugs, but I guess he forgot where he was. And he was going 106 miles an hour into the sharpest curve.
So, and this was this was May 12th, 2015, Amtrak 188.
Yep.
So for anybody that wants to look this up for yourself, and also it's in Bone by Bone, but which we're going to talk about. But you won't believe it. You'll be like, which car was she in? And you'll be like, that car's not there.
Yep. That's exactly right.
Oh
That's
my gosh.
exactly. People ask me if I was thrown out of the train, and I don't remember. I was, unconscious, unresponsive. I, to this day, don't know who found me. I'm eternally grateful. It bothers me because I would so like to thank them. They absolutely saved my life. I know that I was found quickly. I was a Jane Doe. If you think about it, if a guy is thrown out of a train, he probably has a wallet in his pocket.
Mhm.
A woman's probably carrying hers in her bag, or something like that, which, was on the seat, was under the seat. And um, no, nobody knew who I was. I didn't know who I was. But I know from the timestamp on the medical records of Jane Doe, I know I was found quickly. I know I was brought to a local hospital where they quickly realized I was far too severely injured for them to handle, and they, tried to control some bleeding, put me on a ventilator, put in a chest tube, tried to stabilize my spine, and put me on a helicopter for the newest level 1 trauma center in Philadelphia. And by the grace of God, I was, getting the care that I needed. I was in surgery within a couple hours of the accident.
Right. And, you know, uh, your entire body was broken. And I just wanted to ask you, because you don't have a memory of that happening, do you have any loss of memory other than that moment when it happened?
Oh, I was unconscious for days. I don't have, I don't remember. I remember the feeling of tipping over. I
Mm.
remember screaming, and my next real memory is days later waking up, immobilized, seeing nothing but a ceiling. I'm on a ventilator. I can't speak. I'm in traction. I've got a big neck brace on, so of course, I've got feeding tubes and all sorts of, I'm quite wired up, but I just I remember thinking it was a dream. And it was a dream that kept coming back, and it was a long dream, and it was a very slow realization, over days really, that this was real. And because I couldn't speak, I would hear people say, blink once for yes. Can you hear me? Blink twice for no. And your instinct, you keep trying to speak, and I kept being told, don't try to speak, just blink, can you blink? And it, it was unreal. It was unreal.
I can't even imagine waking up to that in that state, having no way to express yourself, not knowing what's going on. Um, it's a nightmare. It wasn't a dream, it's a nightmare.
It it really was, but I was blessed that the first person I saw was the faces of my family, my youngest brother, my mother, my husband, and my family scattered all over the country. I grew up in Texas. I've got a brother up in Seattle, Washington, other siblings in Texas. My parents live in Colorado, so it was even more disorienting when you're opening your eyes and you're seeing all these people that live thousands of miles from you. And but they were so gentle, and I had feeling in my arms, and even though they were in casts, I could feel someone holding
Oh,
my
amazing.
holding my fingers and stroking my head, my hair, and saying, you were in an accident, do you understand? The train crashed, do you understand? Uh, Anyway, it was extraordinary. I remember my brother saying, do you want to know about your injuries? And so I blinked, and I still remember the way he explained it to me, which I'm sure is not, he is a physician, but he explained it in a way that I think a very dazed, concussed, confused person could understand. He said, "Sis, you hit with such force that all of your abdominal organs were thrown up into your chest. So I ruptured my diaphragm, that thick leathery muscle that sort of separates your chest cavity from your abdomen. So my stomach was up by my heart, my colon was in my armpit, my spleen was destroyed, my bladder was ruptured, everything was lacerated, perforated, did various resections to just stop the bleeding and put my organs back where they went. My lungs were, of course, collapsed. My heart was actually pushed a little off where it's supposed to be. And then orthopedically, my chest was crushed on the left side. I broke essentially all my ribs in multiple places. So they call it a flail chest, and you really can't breathe on your own because your chest is too broken to expand, to generate that pressure that it needs to fill your lungs. And my pelvis may have been the most life-threatening immediate injury. It was broken in half. I remember my brother saying, the right side of your pelvis really isn't connected to the left side. I'd broken it through my backbone joint, and the pubic bones were crushed. I broke 3 vertebrae in my neck, in my lower back and my neck, but I broke them in just such a way that it didn't impinge on my spinal cord. And they were pretty sure, they couldn't be sure, but that I wasn't paralyzed.
And you had
Um,
feeling in your hands.
I had
And so
feeling in
could
my
you feel your
hands.
toes? Could you feel your feet?
I don't think so, but I was also in traction and immobilized because my pelvis was so unstable.
Right.
I don't remember being able to move or feel them, but they were confident. Maybe I couldn't walk, but that I wasn't going to be paralyzed. And
Wow.
we were just so grateful when I was finally. My husband searched all night for me. He didn't know. All he knew was I was texting, and about half an hour later, he was looking on his phone and he got this news pop up. Sort of breaking news: Amtrak train derails outside of Philadelphia,
Um,
and he didn't know if it was my train. He didn't know what train number, and he's trying to call me, and I'm not answering, and he finally got the idea to use the Find My iPhone feature, and so he was pinging my phone, like trying to figure out where my phone was, and this kind of Google Earth image comes up of a dot, an icon where my phone is, and it's about 20 feet off of a railroad track in the location where the train crash was reported, and he knew. He knew. He didn't know if I'd just been separated from my phone, or maybe I just couldn't reach him, but he went to a friend's house, they jumped in the car, and he just resolved he was going to find me. He set off for about an hour and a half drive south, just start searching the city and they didn't really know where they were going, but they walked around the site, they walked to various assistance centers. As news of fatalities started coming in, they really started to worry. I have these just heartbreaking texts from my older son. He was 15 at the time, just turned 15, and before my husband jumped in the car to try to find me, he just said, I think mom's hurt. Mom's been in an accident. You're in charge. And, my son, of course, starts Googling and trying to find out what's happening. And my 12-year-old and my 15-year-old start calling hospitals. We're looking for our mom. And they would just say, patients are still coming in. We don't have anybody by that name. And as the hours went by, the fear grew because if I was okay, even if I'd lost my phone, my husband correctly started rationalizing I would have found a way to reach out, let him know where I was, let him know I needed a ride. Um,
Right.
and by
At
about
least tell somebody your name.
exactly, exactly. And they went to, he started just going hospital to hospital in Philadelphia. And at first it would be, we don't have anybody by that name, but keep checking. People are coming in because hundreds of people were on that train and were injured. So it was a mass casualty event. But as the night wore on, they started reporting fatalities, 3 people dead, 4 people, 5. And the texts between my son and my husband, Dad, have you found her? Dad, I need my mom. Dad, people are dead. And my husband said about 4:30 in the morning, they'd searched so many hospitals. He remembers just sinking down to the floor and just knowing either I was so badly hurt I couldn't reach him or I was gone. And he remembers praying what was probably a very strange prayer, just let her be hurt, just let her be too hurt to call. And it was about 6 in the morning the next morning when a nurse had started helping him call hospitals again. And he got word that there was an unidentified woman in surgery at Penn Presbyterian. It was the last hospital on their list. And they
Wow.
went over to get permission to see the patient and try to identify me. And when they walked into the ICU room, my husband turned to his friend. He said, "That's not her." He said his heart just sank. I was I had just come out of surgery. My body is covered in surgical drapes. My hands are in casts. Everything else is covered. I'm on a ventilator, so my face is covered. My eyes are taped shut, and I'm in a big cervical collar, so your neck and everything is covered. So he said, he said, in fairness, I could only see your eyebrows, and they were pretty bloody and bruised up. And he said he remembers his friend told me directly. His friend said, no, John, I think that's her. Those are her eyebrows. And I don't know if it's gallows humor or what, but my husband remembers turning to his friend and saying, "How do you know my wife's eyebrows?" And they were just so emotional, and and
Oh my
and and
gosh.
our friend
And her hair
Glenn
was probably
said,
all bloodied, so you couldn't.
"Oh yeah, yeah." I mean, and literally, you could with my eyes taped shut and the ventilator on, you could only see my eyebrows,
Oh
and
wow.
my head was bruised and bleeding, and he but they asked the hospital staff, does the patient have any personal effects? And they had cut off my clothes, of course, and my jewelry, and they looked at the clothes, but they were dirty and bloody. They had no idea. And then they pulled out this little bag, a plastic bag, has a big biohazard symbol on it, and it had a watch and a bracelet on it, and a ring. And I told my husband, it'd be a much better story if you recognized me by my wedding ring that you gave me. And he goes, a lot of women have rings like that.
Oh.
It's a simple solitaire. But the bracelet and the watch, he said, I know those. I gave her those. Those were birthday presents. It's Geralyn. We found her. And I have the text that night of him sending a note to my son. We found her. She's alive. But then the trauma surgeon came in and talked to him and said, do you want to know what we've done? Do you want to know about our injuries? And my husband said, I've got to call her family. They're all doctors. Please tell them. Just give me a minute and talk to them. And he called my oldest brother, and and my brother ends up talking to the surgeon, and the surgeon said, let's just start at the top. And she started at the top of my head and started working my way. And my brother said, she's about halfway down. And he said, how is she still alive? And the surgeon told him that it probably wouldn't be long, and that if the family wanted to see me, they needed to come. And at that point, my brother called his brothers, called my parents, and everybody got on a plane, and even cross country. They were there by the afternoon.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. My brother still, it's hard for any of us to tell that story. And I know my brothers had a conversation about packing a dark suit for my funeral. And my brother that has his own medical practice, he said he went to his office manager and said, I don't think my sister's going to make it. I don't know when I'm going to be back. And one of them ended up packing the dark suit, and the other decided it would be bad luck and he would just buy a suit if he needed to attend my funeral. And it's crazy the details you think about and that you remember when you're in such an extreme state.
When you woke up, were you feeling pain?
No, I was just numb. I I was just so confused and numb, and it really felt like the only thing I could do was blink. That was it for a while. As the days passed and they started to, and I was in and out for more surgery that first week, kind of every other day. They just left my abdomen open. There was too much repair. It was too much for one surgery, and
Mhm.
they would just go back in the next day and, do some more repairs. And um, but as the days passed, things started to be a little clearer. I started to understand. I started to try to communicate more. And at one point, I could kind of use the fingers on one hand, and they brought me this letter board. It's like a kindergarten, spelling board, and I would try to point to letters to say what I wanted to say, which if you're used to a really active life and maybe you talk a lot, is maddening.
Right, one letter at
You
a
know,
time.
and everybody's trying to help you and guess what you're trying to spell, and they are never right.
Oh
And
my
I would
gosh.
get so frustrated, like, just let me finish. And
Right.
anyway, we laughed. At one point, they decide, okay, this is for the birds, and they brought me this whiteboard, and sort of, I'm right-handed, but with my clunky left hand, trying to kind of sketch out at least a letter or a word at a time, and finally, with a lot of patience, that was about a week later. I'm still on the ventilator. I'm still in this state in the ICU, but I managed to sketch out, I have a lot to say, wipe off, need bigger board. Finally, they bring me this poster size whiteboard that they propped up, beside my bed because it was just getting crazy. But, we were just, the pain came later once I was less just completely anesthetized and numb. And it was extraordinary. It was overwhelming. I mean, you can't rest your chest. You have to breathe. You have to move. And every breath. And of course, I was heavily, heavily sedated with every pain drug out there. But even still, they would tell me to try to breathe deeply, that I needed to do that to heal my lungs, but I would try to breathe as shallowly as I could to make the least amount of movement in my chest, because even through all the drugs, every single breath. And, but during that time, what I remember most was how grateful we were. I They didn't expect me to live. And I was so conscious. They tried to keep it from me, but I insisted. I asked in my clunky, written, blinky way whether people had died. And they tried to distract me, but I could tell they were trying to distract me. And they finally told me that yes, 8 people had died. And we were so aware that after about a week, they gained confidence that I was going to make it and I might get off the ventilator and maybe my body wouldn't be overwhelmed by infection because I had penetrating wounds in addition to all the crush injuries.
Of
Something had,
course.
penetrated my hip, crushed my left hip bone. The wound was open, it was dirty. And as we gained confidence I was going to live, it was a miracle. And I they did so many scans of my brain and they knew I was concussed. I didn't know what year it was. I didn't know who was president, all of those things. Um, but they could tell I didn't have a major brain injury. My brain wasn't swelling, it wasn't bleeding.
That's amazing.
So the fact that I didn't have a brain injury, I wasn't, well, a major brain injury, I wasn't paralyzed, and that I didn't die. We were just so grateful. It was horrifying, it was overwhelming, it was confusing. We didn't know what the future would hold. We couldn't even think more than a day ahead and past whatever the next surgery was going to be. But I was here. I was here, and we were, gratitude, that feeling of gratitude, that feeling of being surrounded by people that loved me, of being held, that sustained us. That really sustained us through some very long weeks in the ICU. A lot of kind of follow-on near misses and tough experiences, but that gratitude sustained us for quite a while.
Did you ever have survivor's remorse?
Um, Not remorse. I didn't. So the short answer is no, but I really struggled to make sense of it.
Mhm.
You know, you can say, why did it have to be my train? How random is that? Um, but you could also say, why those other people sitting right beside me in the car and not me? And I really reject, people would say very kind things like, God has a plan for you and there's a reason. And I really rejected that, to be honest. I would say, in my belief system, God had a plan for those other people too. I didn't deserve to live somehow more than they did. And it was months, and I had been asked to give a talk at my parents' church, actually, and it really caused me to do a lot of deep thinking about the accident. And I really landed on the concept of grace, which is defined as this undeserved, unmerited gift.
Mhm.
And that finally made sense to me. I couldn't accept that I somehow deserved or was stronger, to survive,
Mhm.
but I could accept a gift, that I was given a gift and I don't know why, and there's nothing I did to deserve it, but it was a gift. And then the question is, as time passes, what do you do with that gift? And that's the reason I wrote my book, actually, was not to make any money, I donate every dime that comes in from the book to the American Trauma Society and to trauma support organizations,
Great.
and trauma medicine. But if one person out there, draws some strength or some hope from my experience, then I've done something with this experience, and it's not just this black hole in my life, because otherwise nothing good
Mhm.
came out of it. I mean, it was a tragedy, and 8 families lost loved ones, and hundreds, not just me, but hundreds of people were injured. And so it's like the one thing I can do with the experience, and that at least makes me feel a little bit better about, what was really years lost. I spent 2.5 years, well, about 2 years, almost 4 months, on total disability, out of my job, just recovering and surgeries and therapy and getting my strength back. I was on lots and lots of opioid painkillers for a very long time. So then I had to go through a weaning process.
Mhm.
I went through depression, I went through PTSD, I went through a lot of pain management counseling, all these things that I just, my world changed in an instant. I was jumping on a plane, going to small villages in Africa for the foundation that I managed, and I was attending board meetings and capitals like Brussels and Washington and Tokyo.
Gosh.
And then I'm at home in bed and I'm not able to drive. I'm not able to go to the bathroom by myself. I can't make myself a cup of coffee for over a year, and that was one of the hardest things, accepting that dependence, that loss of control. And, I wanted to have a plan. Okay, well, within 6 weeks, I'm going to do this. I'm calling my boss, tell him I'll be back by the end of the summer. These bones just need to heal. And, I kind of have in mind, well, you break your arm, it heals in 6 weeks, you get the cast off and you're good. And everyone knew it wasn't true, but they didn't want to burst my bubble.
Of course.
They
Right.
wanted, you have to have some optimism.
Right.
But I think one thing I learned in that healing journey was it has to be, that optimism has to be tempered with kind of a cold, hard realism, and that acceptance of a loss of control, that I was, nobody, all of my specialists could talk about the healing time for their body part. but
Exactly.
but nobody had really seen this constellation of injuries. My orthopedic surgeon told me, he said, Geralyn, you tell me somebody comes in to the trauma bay with a crushed chest and pelvis. He said, my next question is, when did they die? He said, and he later told me, he said, I have no medical explanation for how your body absorbed that much force to do what it did to your bones and you don't have a traumatic brain injury. He
That's
said,
incredible.
I don't know where the force, where the energy went. And like I said, you can't hear that and not be grateful. But yet, when every breath hurts after months and you're stuck in bed asking for somebody to help you go to the bathroom, that gratitude starts. It's hard to be grateful for, on the one hand, I was glad I wasn't
Yes.
paralyzed and I could feel the pain, but it's kind of hard to be grateful for pain for very long.
Absolutely.
And that's when the depression set in.
So you said, and I was going to ask you about the PTSD because I work with emotional trauma, psychological trauma things with my
Hmm.
clients. And your whole family has to have it.
Yeah.
Were you
Yeah.
treated? Were you all treated?
Um, Not all of us, and I have some regrets that I did not realize. My kids are great, they're healthy, they're doing fantastic, but I don't think I realized at the time how traumatic it was for them. They were, teenage and preteen, young boys, rambunctious, and they cared, and they said they did amazing things, and they rose to meet this family crisis, this challenge, and I'm so proud of them. I wish I had been able to help them more. My husband and I did get counseling, not just for ourselves, but also for the relationship. As much as I was instantly thrown into this role of patient and total dependent, my husband was instantly thrown into the role of full-time caregiver.
Right.
And we had all good intentions. We had a strong marriage of being there for each other. But I will tell you, those 2 years, there were times when I thought we wouldn't make it. We were having the worst fights of our marriage. We just reacted differently. Our situations were so different. And Jonathan had a lot of anger. He was angry, and it helped him to vent that anger and talk about it. And I was just sad. I was just crying. I was just consumed with getting through the day. I had no headspace for his anger. I said, I can't
I get
take
it.
this, and he felt like he was doing everything for me, and I was ungrateful. I felt like I was being extraordinarily grateful, and he had no idea what I was going through. It
Right.
was tough. And now I know that that is very common and very normal, but we didn't know that at the time. And it was really my trauma surgeon. I give her so much credit. It was at the end of a long day of follow-ups back at the hospital. Every specialist, I'd seen the pulmonologist and the urologist and the neurologist and the orthopedist and the gastro, and my last appointment of the day is with my original trauma surgeon, and they roll me in my wheelchair. And she said, Geraldine, how are you doing? And I went to answer and I immediately started, well, the ribs are doing this, the hips this, it's hard to do this. And she said, no, no, no. How are you doing? And I looked at her and I just realized later I'd started to even think of myself as this collection of broken systems, of broken body parts. And how was I doing as a whole person?
Mhm. Mhm.
I I looked at her and I just burst into tears.
Mhm.
And I realized I didn't know how to answer that question. And I guess the real answer was I was not doing very well. And
Right.
and she said, Geraldine, I recommend that all my trauma patients get counseling for PTSD.
Mhm.
And that had not occurred to me. I knew I was breaking into tears, having bouts of anger. I couldn't sleep. But there were reasons for those things. Yeah, I'd been in an accident. Of course I was sad. I didn't think PTSD applied to me. I was not a combat veteran. I was not a victim of intentional violence, a crime victim, a victim of
Mhm.
domestic violence.
Mhm.
So I didn't think, I was like, I'm a very rational, educated person. Accidents happen. I was in an accident. Car accidents happen all the time. Mine happened to have been a train. And I kind of started arguing with my trauma surgeon. I was like, no, 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 no. Like this was an accident. I know nobody tried to hurt me. And she said, and she didn't argue me, but she just kind of said, she repeated, I recommend that all my trauma patients, and she said, just keep it in mind for me. And it was about a month later, and I was really down, and my husband and I were fighting, and I would find myself yelling at the kids because their bedrooms are upstairs. I'm stuck in the guest room downstairs, basically off the kitchen, and that was pretty much where I lived for over a year. And mom's in bed crying or grouchy, and the kids would retreat upstairs to their rooms. And I said, wait a minute, I no, something's got to
This is a
change. And
family
and I
tragedy.
I did seek out counseling, and it helped me realize that it wasn't weakness. It didn't matter the source of the injury. It's bio it's physiological processes. It's
Yes.
chemicals in
Mhm.
your brain. It is the way your brain is
Mhm.
rewiring itself from this overwhelming trauma and constant bombardment of pain. And that knowledge, understanding at that level why I was feeling like I was. It wasn't that I was wallowing or that I was
Mhm.
seeking attention, or
You
maybe I
didn't want to
just
be a
wasn't.
victim.
Well, I just kept thinking maybe I'm not trying hard enough. I need to
Mhm.
try harder in
Mhm.
physical therapy or in rehab,
Mhm.
or maybe I'm letting the pain get the best of me. I'm
Mm.
maybe I didn't take my meds on time. I
Right.
wanted there to be a reason. And finally I learned, yeah, there's a reason, but it was one that I just didn't understand mental health, to be honest. I thought I did. I thought I was not one of those people that had biases against mental illness, and I realized I absolutely did. I was like, no, 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 that's not me.
Mhm.
It's
Exactly.
like, yeah, of course it's you. Of course it's you.
Of course, it's you. Yeah, people, yeah, PTSD is so misunderstood.
Absolutely.
So many people have it. And,
Absolutely.
anything, you can even watch someone else get injured
Oh,
and you
yeah.
can get PTSD. But what you're saying is something I say to people all the time. Your rational mind is not going to fix this. This is
Right.
this is in the body. This is the nervous system.
That's
Everything is
exactly right.
disrupted, right? And so what was it just talk therapy that you had, or did you have EMDR or anything like that for the trauma?
Yeah, I was never offered EMDR. I think maybe back in 2015 it wasn't as widely
Mhm.
accepted or available.
Right.
I have heard good things about it. I wish I had tried it.
Mhm.
I did. It was talk therapy, and uh, my general practice doctor I was having all sorts of pain. Of course, the pain from the damaged tissue, but also nerve pain because,
Mm,
well, number one, I had damaged nerves, but
that's the
also some of the
worst.
hardware. It is the hardware they had put in my pelvis to steady it. Some of it laid right on top of these major nerves, and
Oh my
it
God.
had to. The doctor said, this is where the hardware has to go for, but it meant I would get these lightning bolt jolts of pain down my good side, down my right side, because those nerves
Mhm.
were impinged by the hardware. And I thought, oh my gosh, I can't move the left side, and now my good side. And so anyway, the point of all that was that my doctor had given me some of the SSRIs, the mood drugs, because they're also indicated for nerve pain.
Right.
And it's funny when she said, they just really, I was taking all sorts of drugs, I think 4 different kinds of opiates and other painkillers and things, non-narcotics also like Lyrica. But she said, maybe this will help. It's indicated for nerve pain, but it's also indicated for mood, and maybe that wouldn't be a bad thing. And I think because technically I was being prescribed it for pain and not for mood, I
Oh,
accepted it.
okay.
And again, that was part of my bias going in,
Okay.
that no, 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 I don't need a mood stabilizer. So I did, in a backward kind of way, begin taking antidepressants. And I think that, and the therapy, and frankly time, faith, my
Mhm.
family, having friends around that just, scooped up our family and took care of us for so long. My parents, they flew in, as I mentioned, within hours of the accident, and they didn't leave for months. They just they went to they went to Target, they bought some clothes, and they just,
They just,
moved in the
wow.
whole months I was in the hospital and in the rehab facility, and then helping me transition home in my wheelchair. I was so fortunate, which did contribute to some guilt, about the depression and the PTSD. I thought, people died. I am gonna be better. I may be in a wheelchair now and in this big brace, but I'm at home at a beautiful house looking out over, it was the summertime, looking out over my yard, access to the best doctors, good insurance, family surrounding me. What right did I have to be crying and depressed? And I felt guilty that I wasn't recovering quicker. I felt guilty that I was sad. And that took me a while to give myself a break and say, I had to I had to give myself a break, and I had to let go of control. This need to set a deadline by which I was going to be better. I was going to be walking. I'd be back to work. I had to accept that I kept the
You lost
optimism.
control. You had no
Well,
control.
I was going to do those things. I wasn't going to give that up, but I couldn't control the schedule. It wasn't going to be on my timeline. It was going to take a lot longer than I wanted. And once I kind of came to that, once I finally called my boss, I kept calling him every 6 weeks. Well, just another month or two, just another month or two. And I finally called him. It was almost I don't know, 10 months after the accident. I just found out I needed another big reconstructive surgery. And I finally said to him, Mike, I have no idea when I'm coming back. And he
And he
said,
knew
yeah,
it. He,
exactly, exactly.
he
He
knew it.
said, yeah, I know. And and in a way that was so freeing and liberating to just say, I, I'm doing my best. That's all I got. I don't know. And just accepting that, and that my job right now was just to work on recovery and be with my family. That was my job, and that was it.
Right.
And that was hard enough.
And that message is so important for my listeners to hear.
Yeah.
Um, it's not, I have training in a particular kind of trauma therapy. And one of the things they say is it's not all in the mind. People think our mind controls everything. Oh no, oh no, no, no. The body
That
is what
s-
controls everything. And and but the way that you were talking to yourself and treating yourself is so common with
yeah.
people with all things. I should be able to do this. And not only that, now not in your situation, but people will say to them, you should be able to do this. You know, why is
Yeah,
it taking, so people really need to understand
right.
that trauma and mental health issues are not necessarily in the mind, and that's so important.
It's
So
that connection. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
it's
interrupt you, but
okay.
that connection is so important to understand, and understand that this is not a soft, fuzzy thing. I mean, they see it on brain imaging studies. This is science, and that's what resonated with me. That's what I needed to understand. Maybe everybody wouldn't need to understand it that way, but I did. And the same thing was true almost in reverse. I had always dismissed therapies like meditation and, oh, that's just,
Woo woo. That's woo woo
yoga.
stuff.
Exactly, exactly. And understanding that no, there are patterns of thinking. There is, this concept of neuroplasticity, that you can retrain your brain in how it responds to those pain signals. That was huge for me. And I only got there out of desperation. It was, I don't know, 7, 8 months after the accident. They were starting to try to wean. I was trying to wean off the fentanyl. I'd been on huge doses of
Oh
fentanyl just
my
so I could
gosh.
breathe for months and months and months. And finally, all under medical supervision,
Mhm.
I was starting to wean. And I wasn't addicted in the sense of having those psychological cravings, like I need the drug, but your body is absolutely accustomed to it. Your body is physically dependent on it. And so as I started weaning, all of the withdrawal symptoms you hear about, the shakes, the nausea, and of course you have less pain medicine, you have more pain. And
Pain.
I'm thinking, it's 9 months after the accident, and here I am in my bathrobe, unshowered, all day long, staring at the fire, crying, shaking, chilled, nauseous. I I was at the end of my rope. I was like, I have everything medical science has to offer me. I have the best health care, and and look at me, look at me. And I finally did, a friend had recommended this trauma trained yoga instructor who did a lot of meditation.
Good.
And I didn't believe in it, but I was so desperate I would try anything.
Right.
And she would come to my house and work with me. And I always thought like, oh, yoga's for people that like don't really want to sweat when they exercise. I was so arrogant, and I was like, meditation, like, give me a break, how boring. And when I was pregnant with my first son, I refused to go to those breathing classes because I was birthing classes. I told my husband, I've been breathing for 30 years. I think I got this down.
Right. Exactly.
So, the idea of sitting there and doing breathing exercises to heal me, I was like, ha, you know, but when I opened my mind to it, when I gave it a try, I still found it really boring, but it helped. I mean, it just blew me away how much it actually helped, and that it gave me back this sense of control, this sense of agency over my body, that I there was something I could do about it. And that was really empowering as well.
So, um, what I hear here, the sense, and this would be for pretty much everybody, the sense of losing complete control over your life, over your
Yeah,
body, over everything is very difficult.
yeah,
But for someone who's structured by control,
yeah,
it's particularly difficult, right? So, are you somebody that was particularly like you did it,
yeah.
it happened. You created it, it happened.
Yeah, I like the way that you put that. I don't consider myself it sounds kind of pejorative, a controlling person, but I am very goal oriented. I have two advanced degrees. I had a high level job. I traveled a lot very independently. I was extremely active. And so, yeah, you got to set a schedule if you're going to get off your plane from China and still make the T-ball game in the afternoon, dragging your suitcase behind you across the field. That was me, and all of the sudden The only thing on my calendar was physical therapy that I had to ask somebody to drive me to every day. And, pretty much a zillion doctor's appointments and when was the next surgery. And that was it. That was it. And
Are you more, ever having gone through all of this, are you more a go with the flow person, or are you back to wanting
You
your
know,
regimen?
I have a better perspective on time
Mhm.
and trying to really see time as a gift. And it happened over the course of my recovery. I was in bed one afternoon, still in my pajamas. I must not have had physical therapy that day, and it's 3 in the afternoon, and all three boys come home from school. They walk in the door. They're I don't know, 9, 13, 16, and by that point, and it hit me like, I'm never home when they come in the afternoon. Like,
Mm,
I try to be home at night for dinner, but if I wasn't traveling, but I'm like, I'm here every day, right here in the kitchen when they come in, and like trying to, I thought I need to turn that around. I'm not stuck here. I'm here when they come in, and for the foreseeable future, I'm not going anywhere, and I need to be using that time. So kind of I guess that productivity, urge. It's like, let's use this time, and what a gift. And so, I vowed that day that if I did nothing else, I was going to be out of bed by 3 o'clock. That was what I read this book. It was called that we all have our personal scum line. And I was like, okay, no matter what else, no matter how bad I'm feeling, I will at least be out of bed by 3 in the afternoon. And the boys aren't going to come in from school every day and see their mom in bed. Like, I'm going to be up. I'm going to be up. And just setting that kind of goal as opposed to, I'm going to be back at work in a month. That was a realistic goal. That was something I could do. And then sometimes all four of us, three boys and me, we'd go back, into my bed. I had one of those big hospital beds that did all these adjustments that the boys like to play with. And we'd watch a movie in the afternoon. And it was like, wow, there's joy in this. There's joy in this. There's joy in being in a big bed and wrapped up with my boys at 4 in the afternoon watching a movie. When did I ever get to do that? And I notice it in my kids too. We hug more. We say I love you more. And they have a sense of perspective and I think empathy
mhm,
that is the silver lining in this experience for them too.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, I see a silver lining. Of course, what you went through, that can't compare. But
Yeah,
there's always something that you take away.
right.
So how are you doing now? You still have issues, right? You're still,
I'll never be the same. I'll never be as healthy as I was. I will always be, it's funny, somebody asked me how I identify, how I describe myself. I said, there's no one thing that I say, oh, well, I'm an amputee, I'm this. I said, I'm medically vulnerable. I said, that's how I describe
okay.
myself. I'm immunocompromised. I don't have a spleen. My lungs are pretty scarred. My abdomen is absolutely full of scar tissue. So I keep having to have surgery to kind of clear out the scar
The
tissue. And
adhesions, yeah, right.
sometimes I've had a couple emergencies where my intestines have gotten twisted over themselves because of the scar tissue, and you've got to go in and
Mm,
have a big emergency surgery and do a big resection. And, next thing you know, you're in the hospital for 6 weeks again. But I'm okay. All of that said, my pain is manageable with no prescription medicines. I take nothing but Advil and Tylenol, although I do take a lot of Advil and Tylenol.
okay.
But that's it. And I walk without a limp most times, except on bad days. I don't run, but I can exercise and I do Pilates. I'm working full time. I
Wow.
travel. I This summer I had a trip to Rwanda for work, Switzerland for work, the West Coast twice, actually 3 times.
So you're back at it.
I am, and I
Wow.
am so grateful. I'm back at it not because I just feel like I have to work, but I believe my work is meaningful. I think I am more thoughtful about my work now. And when I went back to work very slowly, first part-time, then full-time, and my friend said, "Why are you doing this? Why are you going back to the corporate world after what you've been through?" And I really did think about it. It had been a couple years at that point, and I said, I work in healthcare. I believe in what we do. I wasn't ready to retire. My boys are getting older. But after a couple years, I went back for different reasons. I went back because I really believe in the purpose of what we do. And I promised myself that the day I felt like I was punching a time clock or just getting through the day would be the day I quit and do something else, and I've tried to keep that sensibility, that sense of purpose and using the time that I was gifted.
Right. And you were gifted. And this writing this book and being able to share these messages of, hope and faith and um, patience and courage, all of these things, amidst all the negativity, is so important for people to understand that.
Yeah,
And it's tragic that you had to go through that to reach that. But the point is, you've used it and you're putting that message out there.
I'm
And that's
trying. I
very
am I am
important.
trying. We all have something. Mine was kind of unusual in that not too many people are in major train derailments, but we all we all have something. Car accidents are tragically common. Terrible diagnoses. People have stuff with their kids
Right.
or
And I deal with emotional abuse with all my clients, and it's
exactly,
years and
or a
years and years of it.
relationship. Yeah, we all, very few of us walk through this life unscathed. And
Nobody
so that
does.
exactly. My hope is that a message of hope and positivity and the healing power of time and perspective.
Mhm,
My hope is that maybe it helps somebody else out there.
mhm. And it will. And it will. And doing this interview today is really important in that journey because my audience is really geared towards this. This is a great this is a great this is great information. This is a great
Thank you.
experience to share. Your perspective is really important for everybody to hear. You know, and the thing is, we can't compare one tragedy to another. We can't say,
No,
okay, that was worse, so I shouldn't feel bad. Like you
right,
said, well, they all died and I'm alive, so I shouldn't feel bad. No,
right. It's true.
we each have our own journey
Right,
of what we're going to go through.
right.
And to us, it could be the most important thing, the most devastating thing to us. It doesn't necessarily mean that somebody else could, I mean,
That's right.
we
We're
all go through
individuals.
something. We do.
That's right. And we go through it in different ways. We experience in different ways. But I so appreciate what you do because there is power in sharing our story. Trauma is so isolating. I talked about how hard it was on the relationship my husband and I have, and happy to say we've been married 26 years. We got through it, but there was a time we thought we weren't going to. And you feel like even the people you're closest to in your life cannot understand. And in a way they can't, right? This
I can't.
disconnectedness. And that's actually why I called my book Bone by Bone. It is an allusion to kind of the gradual process of healing. And yes, I broke a lot of bones, but there's this poem by Emily Dickinson, and the last line, it's called "There is a pain so utter," and the last line is talk that is bone by bone, and
Oh, wow.
it talks about that disconnectedness that is such a characteristic of trauma, and that feeling of isolation and alienation from other people that just can't understand what you're feeling. And that's why I think it's important for people that have these experiences to share them, because
Wow.
you're not totally alone. You're not the only one going through it, and there is positivity on the other side.
Right. And there's a gift in that survival, or
Yes.
something, there's a purpose in that survival.
Yep.
And you've got to find some way to to have that purpose.
Yep.
What did this has to happen for some reason. So
Right.
you wrote the book,
Yep.
and you're sharing these experiences, which is so healing.
Yep.
Um,
Well, it is, and it's funny, people have heard of post-traumatic stress, but they haven't, post-traumatic growth, is a real
it is.
thing.
It's huge.
And they've heard of survivor's guilt, but they might not have heard of survivor's pride. And I take no pride in surviving May 12th, surviving the day of the accident. As I said, that was a gift, that was luck, that was fate, whatever your
However you
your
want to
your
say it.
your framework, yeah, tells you it was. But the day after, and the day after, and the month after, I do have pride in. And I didn't do it alone. I had so much help and support, but you don't get through it without um, a lot of inner strength. And it's okay to feel proud of that. We should feel proud of that. And survivor's pride is so justified. And I
Mm,
I do have that, and I've accepted that that's a good thing. That's not something to be ashamed of. I have earned that.
that's. I'm so glad you said that. I
Thank
think
you.
that's probably such a great way to sort of end this interview because, yeah, I always tell people, just look in the mirror, just go, I'm a survivor. I'm a survivor.
Exactly.
It it is. You need to cheer that on because
Yeah.
that's quite an accomplishment. But the other thing is that through all of this, you like you said, you gain this inner strength, this ability. You have to validate yourself. You have
Yeah.
to be the person to you can't be bouncing stuff off of people because you're not going to get what you need. You
Right.
have to develop all these tools within. But the other side of this is glorious.
That's absolutely right.
Mhm,
That is absolutely
mhm,
right. The it sounds I don't know, maybe silly, but the sun shines brighter, the sunsets are prettier, and as I said, in my family, I know that we hug each other tighter and more often.
wow, what a story.
Thank you.
I'm so happy that we're able to sit here and talk about this.
Thank you. Thank you. I really
So,
appreciate the opportunity, and
yeah. So
the
this is
book
the book,
is,
everybody, Bone by
yeah,
Bone, and buy it. Not only will you love the story, but it's going to go to really important, um, you know, uh, um, yeah.
well, you're
I don't
supporting
want to say
other.
charities, but it's
No, it's you're supporting others by doing it. Part of the money goes to the Trauma Survivors Network, which is a peer network open for any trauma survivor, no fee, no,
okay.
and it's a place you can gather with other survivors and just share stories. And it's a place where you can feel less alone and realize what you're going through is normal,
Mhm.
is expected, and it's not forever.
It's
It's
not
not forever.
mm.
Thank you, Randy.
Yes. On that note, beautiful. Um, I'm so glad that we got to meet today, and that I got to talk to you about this. And I'm so glad that my listeners get to hear your perspective on this because it's so enlightening.
Thank you.
It
Thank
is
you. I really
so enlightening.
appreciate
It
it.
really is. It's these messages are so important, and I'm really glad that we got to share that today.
Thank you.
So have a wonderful day and keep up
You
the
have a
good.
wonderful day, and I hope your listeners do as well. And again, thank you for the opportunity.
You're
Bye
welcome.
bye.